Yo, what's good folks, it's KnightmareFrame here with a new Warframe build video. Dang, this is one of my most requested build videos, and here we finally are. Nidus, man, why don't you introduce yourself?
Welcome to my domain. I shall feast on your flesh, body, and soul, and become one with me, the king of infested Nidus.
And I thought Necros was edgy, goddamn! So Nidus has a very unique kit and one of the most well-designed warframes. Like 10 out of 10 DE, well done. And he can be very hard to understand for newer and average players. So before I get into the build, I would like to go over his abilities, passives, and what he is designed for. He can be used in a team, but when you play with Nidus, you're best off playing solo, cause you will always have that one douche monkey who kills the enemies you've sucked in before you can press your 1. Anyway, I digress. So let's start off with his passives, because you need a solid understanding of the passives to utilize and comprehend his abilities. And to understand his passives, you need to understand his abilities. And this is why he's hard for some players, cause it's a back and forth thing. So first thing you notice is that he has no shields, just health. Like Inaros, but way different. So when you level up Nidus, he gains a bonus to some of his attributes. So at max rank, he gains 200% more health, 15% power strength, 50% to his energy pool, and 50% extra armor. And he has the ability to regenerate health when he takes damage. You can try using rejuvenation to slightly amplify this effect, but this regen is pretty minuscule, especially at higher levels, and no point in using that aura mod whatsoever. Moving on to his mutation stacks. This is a resource that only Nidus can use. Similar to Baruch, who has his restraint meter to use his ultimate, Nidus has his stacks, and 2 of his abilities do not use or consume energy, but rather these mutation stacks. You can see the stack counter on the bottom right of your screen. You build up your stacks by using your first ability on enemies. The more stacks he builds up, the more effective and devastating Nidus becomes. These stacks cap at 100. The more stacks you build up, the more Nidus changes in appearance. His third ability consumes 1 stack, and his fourth ability takes 3. But there is his last passive that consumes these stacks, and that's his Undying passive. And this is what makes Nidus not give any f***. When Nidus takes a lethal hit, he will restore 50% of his health back and become invulnerable for 5 seconds, and this will consume 15 stacks. This gives Nidus a total of 7 lives. The more you keep on building up these stacks, he's literally immortal.
I've no more fucks to give, my fucks have runneth dry. I tried to go fuck shopping, but there's no fucks left to buy.
And I recorded this footage while I was watching my Netflix series cause I knew I wasn't in any real trouble until I forgot to actually pay attention to what was happening on the screen. Yep, that happened. Starting on his abilities. Virulence. This ability scales off of power and range. Nidus stomps the ground and generates this streak of infested fungal mutation, erupting and dealing damage to anything in its path. It does IPS damage, and the damage you deal scales even more with the amount of stacks you gain. For each enemy you hit, you gain a mutation stack, and when you hit enemies with this ability, you get a portion of that energy refunded back to you. Hitting multiple enemies will essentially yield a higher energy refund, basically making this ability a free cast. And that's why you don't ever have to worry about having efficiency on your build, so making him a perfect warframe to utilize Blind Rage. If you hold down your 1, you will get a rectangle marker showing you where your ability will end up before releasing it. You can jump, dodge roll, go all Cirque du Soleil while holding down the ability before releasing it, and it synergizes super well with the third ability, but we'll get to that. You cannot recast this ability until it's completed its fungal growth at its maximum range. That's why it's best to cast this in front of a wall or an obstacle to stop the growth, so you can spam the ability to rapidly build up those stacks.
Stacks T, baby!
His second ability, Larva. It is a crowd control ability, pulling in enemies to the center of where you aimed the ability. Larva scales off of range and duration. That's basically all it does. It's perfect to clump up all the mobs into a pile so you can spam your first ability into them to build up your stacks. And this is the last ability that requires any energy from Nidus. Parasitic Link. The third ability, it requires 1 mutation stack to cast this ability. You can link yourself to an enemy or an ally. Each action gives different results and buffs. Linking yourself to an ally will grant both of you with a power strength bonus. The more power you have, the more you buff. If the link target dies, you get refunded that 1 stack you used on them. Like seriously, 1 stack. But anyway, this means a powerful roar if used on a rhino and insane buffs with Wisp's reservoirs, and etc. And especially if you buff yourself with Pax Bolt, you can get some pretty powerful buff numbers. When linked to an enemy, you completely incapacitate them and they will not take any damage from outside sources, and this grants you 90% damage redirection. Basically, 90% of the damage you take will be directed to the linked target, and while linked to the enemy, you gain immunity to status effects. Also, while you're linked to that target, you gain an additional source for your virulence to manifest from, giving you that double cast feature, which also increases the mutation stack buildup. And finally, Ravenous. This is when Nidus unleashes an infested mutated grass of doom. It is set at 8 meters and does not scale with range. It heals allies and spawns maggots. These seek out and feast on enemies. The maggots will stun the enemy, dealing insignificant damage. Casting your virulence into the enemies infested with the maggots will cause the maggots to explode and deal blast damage, and in the process you double your mutation stack buildup. The explosion radius scales from range. The more power strength you have, the more Ravenous heals you over time. Lastly, by also holding down your 1, all the maggots will be highlighted for you, but there's no point for this anyway. It does slow down your gameplay. Alright, finally getting into the build section of this video. You can play Nidus however you like, but this is how I do. So you do you and I do me, you dig? Also, before you ask how many forma I've placed into my Nidus, I'm sorry, I have no idea. None of my Warframes have less than 5 forma, as I change builds ever so often. Anyway, so in the aura I got growing power, for that 25% power strength increase when inflicting a status effect. And in the Exilus I have an enemy radar. You can run enemy sense or vigilante pursuit, giving me that 30-meter radar to spot enemies, as it helps knowing where the enemies are to pull them efficiently with your larva, and also helps with enemy pathing, especially during endurance runs. Stretch gives me a 17-meter radius pull on my larva, also 29 meters on my enemy link, and an insane 58 meters on my ally link. Power strength at 269% with blind rage and the 2 Umbra mods. Usually this would give me 254, but one of Nidus's passive grants him 15% additional power strength. This helps with our virulence damage and healing from our Ravenous. Flow for that energy pool, you don't need it, but I prefer the extra energy. Hunter Adrenaline to grant me energy when I take health damage. And a normal continuity, because you don't need insane amounts of duration on Nidus. To be honest, you can literally run without duration mods, as he has one of the best durations in the game, just like Saren. But I like having the 77 seconds of parasitic link because I sometimes forget that I am linked to a target. And lastly, adaptation. And now you're thinking, why use this when your 3 already gives you status immunity? The link does provide 90% damage redirection, so the damage you take is redirected to the linked enemy. And if you take a lot of damage, your linked target will die off too quick. So adaptation reduces the damage you take to reduce the damage the linked target takes, thus having a longer lasting bullet sponge. And it does also help when your link is down. The arcanes are a personal preference. You can run Arcane's Guardian and Grace for more armor and health regen, or dual Graces, or even dual Guardians. So it's up to you. And now, the most annoying things that hurt Nidus are Ancient Healers and Nullifiers. So that's why I have specific weapons that help out. The Miter with Neutralizing Justice, and a weapon that strips armor and spreads radiation, and that's a Maradetron. Now I know this weapon can be expensive to buy off of other players, or you'd have to wait for ages for Barrow to bring it into his collection. So that's why I suggest making yourself a kick gun that does what the Maradetron does, but better. Now you may be asking, why radiation? It's because it helps against the Ancient Healer aura, which gives the enemies 90% damage reduction and crowd control immunity. This means they can prevent you from pulling in enemies with your larva. I did forget to take this weapon and I realized way too late, and I decided to stick with what I have because Nidus doesn't care, so why should you? And this is what it's actually supposed to do.
It's all safe, but you won't take blame, even when you are blowing up. Oh my,
appropriate amount of armor strip with that one-shot mechanic when paired with the Redeemer Prime. Anyway, formally introducing the hefty Baby Maker, built from the Tomb Finger Chamber, Ram Flare Loader, and the Ramble Grip, giving you that fast fire rate and a high status chance to reach that beautiful 100% mark with the 3 dual stat mods. The Tomb Finger has innate radiation and does splash damage when it makes contact with any surface or enemy, making it perfect for this situation. A very simple build with damage, multi-shot, and a lot of elements. And what makes this even better than the Maradentron is the large magazine size and infinite ammo, with the help of the Kit Gun Arcane PAX Charge, turning your clip into a battery, so giving you infinite ammo. Now moving on to the Miter. This weapon ain't impressive in any way, but what makes this weapon useful is its Syndicate augment called Neutralizing Justice, which comes from the Steel Meridian Syndicate, and it gives you that 90% chance to pop a nullifier bubble permanently, meaning once it's popped they cannot respawn that bubble ever again, which can also allow you to use your parasitic link on a nullifier and not have to worry about it regenerating its bubble. To be honest, you don't need to build this for anything hectic, just fill it with fire rate, a lot of multi-shot, projectile flight speed, and the augment, and that's all you need. With a lot of multi-shot, it's not going to be 90%, it's going to be 100%. And lastly, my Redeemer Prime, built for gas and magnetic. Once you suck up the enemies with your larva, shoot them with the Baby Maker to strip armor and decimate them with the Gas Redeemer. Gas brings that insane damage over time, Cloud of Death, and with the enemies all clumped up together, it's even more devastating. A very simple and straightforward and powerful build. Alright, and here we are, Nidus, the Infested King. If you feel like I missed something or any insight on how you play your Nidus, do drop it in the comment section. So, this is my Nidus, the Insatiable Beast. I do hope you've enjoyed the video and found it informative and helpful. And if you did, do feel free to leave a like, share, and
Subscriber,
or a thumbs down if you didn't. For more Warframe content, Discord link, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.
It's all the same, but some things never change. I couldn't stop and say no. It's all the same, but you won't take the blame, even when you are blue.